Sean Coleman.
Good day, everyone. So, I was asked a question about conflict, and in particular, it was about the product owner kind of complaining about the performance of the Scrum Master during the sprint review. And there's all sorts of things inside there, high responsive advisors and stuff. There's all sorts of problems in there because, first of all, the sprint review is meant to be an opportunity to collaborate on what to do next. And hopefully the product owner would have invited stakeholders. And the product owner, one of her jobs actually is to manage expectations, I guess, connect with stakeholders and kind of manage the politics really. And I'm not really sure how smart it is to be bringing up conflict within the Scrum team at the sprint review when all the stakeholders are there. Hi, Jose, how are you doing? So the sprint review really is an opportunity to inspect the done increment that's already being provided by the developers, and it's also an opportunity to inspect what we've already hopefully released, and maybe to consider as well the results of some experiments, or maybe customer interviews that we had during the sprint for people who are into Scrum UX as well, or Kanban with UX, looking at the results of experiments, because a lot of the time when we try to deliver stuff, actually a lot of the stuff we were thinking of delivering we should never actually build. And if you do discovery, you run some experiments, you can discover that. So the sprint review is an opportunity to collaborate on what to do next. And while it was even mentioned in the 2017 guide that you might talk about some problems that happened during the review, the unwritten rule really is that you don't kind of show your dirty laundry in public, so to speak. And so, really, if there was to be an event where conflict was to arise, I probably would expect that maybe to happen during the daily, where developers are meeting each other and they're talking, but the product owner really shouldn't be there at the daily, and the Scrum Master doesn't have to be there. So you can understand why the retrospective might be an opportunity to do that, and you don't even have to wait till the end of the sprint actually to have a retrospective. Now, the issue here is that the product owner seems to have an issue with the performance of the Scrum Master, which is a bit vulnerable because the Scrum Master, if she had to have one gig in a sprint, I guess, probably would be facilitating the retrospective, and even then, it might be handed out to shared by developers in the team, or so it's a bit awkward. And so if there's something where you're the Scrum Master yourself and you feel that how you're performing is under scrutiny as well, it kind of limits your ability to be independent as a facilitator, and you might need to be part of the discussion. So it might be wise to invite someone else that the Scrum team trusts to facilitate the retrospective, so you can have a really good discussion about what's going on. That said, I use two mnemonics to remind ourselves that the spirit of Scrum, ita focker. So in inspection, seeing what's going on, but also needing transparency to enable that inspection to happen. And then adaptation, they're the three pillars of Scrum. And then the five Scrum values, Fokker is the mnemonic I used to like to use, like the movie Meet the Fockers, except it's a C instead of a K. Focus, openness, courage, commitment, and respect. So we expect Scrum teams to commit to the three pillars of Scrum and to the five Scrum values. And to borrow a line from Ryan Ripley from Agile for Humans, when I was talking to him a couple of years ago about Agile leadership, he said that Agile leaders need to be ruthless with value, but compassionate with people. And I think that's a really nice one liner. I think it also applies to the product owner. And I'm kind of curious why the product owner thinks it's acceptable to be talking about the Scrum Master's performance in front of everyone at the sprint review. Surely that's something that could have been discussed in advance, maybe more privately. You can bring it up at the retrospective, but remember, in the retrospective, we've got the prime directive. If you're doing this professionally, you're following maybe Esther Darby's guidance on retrospectives, and one of the things is to make sure that there's no finger pointing at the sprint review. So there's smacks of finger pointing, giving out about the performance of the Scrum Master at the retrospective. That said, if this has kind of been building up for a while, and maybe there has been some conversations, I can understand how it could eventually happen. Um, and the retrospective would probably be the least worst places to have a discussion about that. And I've actually had a situation myself where I was a Scrum Master, and it wasn't the product owner who had an issue with my performance; it was the developers that had an issue with my performance back in 2008 to 2010. And the issue was that there was a lot of compliance in this organization, and I thought I was doing the team a favor. I thought I was removing an impediment by dealing with all the compliance work to be done. So it wasn't good enough that the team had a done increment, but we had to have a compliant increment, otherwise we could not go live. And so I was kind of negotiating in a sense with supporting functions, we call it at the time, and we call it enabling functions or compliance police or whatever. I found a much more positive way of dealing with that later on, because people looking after compliance are, trying to do a good job and trying to make sure, trying to keep the company safe. So I was doing all of that compliance work myself, instead of actually making that work visible on the product backlog, and maybe letting the developers help also with some of that work, because that's work that actually needs to be done to deliver a done increment. It also needs to be a compliant increment if we're going to be able to release that. And so the team gave out to me about this. And I'm glad they did. They did bring it up. Actually, no, I remember they brought it up in a retrospective, but it was brought up with me one to one before that, and I really appreciated that discussion. I appreciated that that person was quite brave. It was a culture as well where people are quite okay with being direct with each other, and I'm like that as well. So I really appreciated this. And so there's ways of dealing with it. There's a more advanced topic in terms of, like, let's say I'm a scrum master and maybe I'm just not a good fit for the team. Maybe I'm too agile for the team, or maybe I haven't adapted my behavior to the level of agility of the team, or maybe the team is much more agile than me, and I'm doing Scrum by the book or something like that, where Scrum by the book is seen as kind of a negative thing, that we're not doing things because it's the right thing to do. We're doing it because that's what the Scrum Guide says, instead of explaining to people why the Scrum Guide says it should be that way. So often we need to look as well to see, do we have the right fit? Um, can we adapt in such a way? And that's where really I would hope that uh, agile leaders would be able to step in as well, in terms of seeing, do we have the right people on the bus, and do we have the right people on the right seats in the bus, and do we have the right person driving the bus, or the product owner is driving the bus, metaphorically. That's a metaphor from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. And so we do need to ask that every now and again. An agile leader, hopefully a very good agile leader, would be able to spot that there's a kind of a mismatch. And if there's a scrum master who maybe isn't quite at the races, the scrum master is at the end of the day on the hook for the effectiveness of the scrum team. And if there are lots of failure modes going on, okay, the team might be failing despite the scrum master being brilliant, or the opposite, the scrum team might be doing, it could be the opposite as well. So it's it's a tricky one, but a scrum master is at the end of the day on the hook for the effectiveness of the scrum team. So if you're a scrum master and somebody's complaining about your performance, instead of defending yourself, it's okay to defend yourself, but listen to the music and what are people saying, and is there some truth in what's being said, and is there something that you can do to improve that situation? If you have any topics that you'd like to bring up, you can just comment on whichever channel you're watching, and I'd be delighted to deal with that. Thank you for everyone watching today, and looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Have a lovely day. Thank you.